Okay, so a couple questions we had on our practice at night was chapter 5, question number 11. And not all questions, but 3 specific questions in this group. So the first one would be 2m minus 1 divided by 19 equals m divided by 10. So the first thing is I'm going to, if this is being divided by 19, I'm going to multiply by 19, essentially like that. And if 10 is in division, I'm going to multiply the opposite side by 10. And some of you guys understand this as cross multiplying. So on the right side, I have 19m equals 10 is going to multiply to both of these, so 20m minus 10. And then we have something we can solve. So I'm going to subtract 20m, negative 10 equals negative 1m, and if I divide by negative 1, I get the value of 10 for m. The second question I saw that you guys had for number 11 is this one, the square root of x plus 2 equals 5. Now, we don't need to have any solving skills in order to solve this. We can just really kind of think about it. I'm going to show you some solving skills, but let's just think about it first. Some number, if I take the square root of that, gives me 5. What is that number? 25. The square root of 25 is 5. So this means that this number has to be 25 in the square root. So what number plus 2 gives me 25? And that number is 23. So the answer is x equals 23. If you take 23, add it to 2, you get the square root of 25. The square root of 25 is 5. Okay? So let's take a look at what kind of skills we might have had from algebra to solve this. Okay. So when we're solving the Pythagorean theorem, we might have something like this, and we do x squared minus, plus 9 equals 25. We subtract 9 on both sides. We get 16. We have this thing called x squared. In order to undo the x squared, we take the square root. So it turns out the square and the square root, they're opposites of each other, just like division is opposite of multiplication. So essentially they are inverses and they undo each other. So that's how we are able to find x is 4. So the square root and the square are opposites and they undo each other. So I'm going to come over here to our equation and I'm going to square this whole piece, because I know the square and the square root cancel each other. But if I square the left side, I have to square the right side. So 5 squared ends up being 25, and I get this equation. And from here, we find that x equals 23, which is what we got before. The last question for number 11 from your practice is 3p squared plus 10p minus 8 equals 0. And there's 2 ways we can solve this. One way is to factor. The other way is the quadratic formula. Okay. Quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Okay. Factoring is when we take groups and multiply them together. So here's what we're going to do. 3p times p. If I check these will multiply to be 3p squared. Check. Now I'm going to take a look at the 8. I know that 2 times 4 would give me 8. Check. But I haven't checked this middle section. So let's go ahead. I'm going to give myself some room here. I'm going to check that middle section, that middle term. So this right here would multiply to be 6p. This right here would multiply to be 4p. And if I added them together, it would be 10. However, let's check one last thing. A positive 4 times a positive 2 would give me a positive 8. But I don't have a positive 8. So I can't use 2 and I can't use 4. Well, let's try them to be negative. This right here is negative 6. This multiplied would be negative 4. And that would give me negative 10p. But I don't have negative 10p. I have positive 10p. So using 4 and 2 in this way doesn't work. I've checked both ways by using negatives and it didn't work. So I'm going to reverse my process. What if I put 2 here and what if I put 4 there? Let's check this middle term one more time. 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times p is 2p. If I subtract them, that would give me positive 10. So that means the 4 would have to be positive and the 2 would have to be negative. Now let's check that 8 one more time. This should be a negative 8. Negative 2 multiplied by positive 4, that gives me negative 8. Perfect. So that is what we call factoring. Now, while this took a while to guess and check, this is not our final answer. Our final answer comes from solving each of these factors when they're equal to 0. So using my solving skills, I get negative 4. Using my solving skills over here, I have positive 2/3. So factoring is one way in where we used to solve this quadratic equation. Now I will get the same answer when I'm using my quadratic formula. So let's check this out. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8, all divided by 2 times 3. So let's go ahead and multiply some things. I know this is 6. I know 10 squared is actually 100. And let's write this down because now it looks messy. Now the last thing, negative 4 multiplied by 3. This right here is negative 12. Negative 12 multiplied by a negative 8 is a positive 96. So we have 196 over 6. The square root, excuse me. So now let's go ahead, grab our calculator. The square root of 196 ends up being 14. So now let's go find our two answers. Negative 10 plus 14 divided by 6. And our second answer is going to come from negative 10 minus 14 divided by 6. So calculating these two answers, we end up getting negative 4. And we end up getting negative 4 over 6, which is the same as positive 4 over 6, which is the same as positive 2/3. So these answers end up being the same.